Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Norwich Economic Podcast here at the School of Economics at the University of East Anglia. So, my name is George Papadopoulos. I'm a lecturer in econometrics here at the School of Economics, and I will be hosting today's session. So, before we start, I would like to kindly ask all people in the audience, if possible, please you keep your mics muted and your camera switched off, as this session is currently being recorded. And of course, feel free to use the chat function if you want to ask any questions. We'll try to address as many questions as possible today. So today's session is all about the data analysis, data science sector. It's a sector that has become quite prominent in the last years. And it is quite evident, at least to me, and as far as I talk with employers and so on, that the demand for data analysts and scientists is becoming even stronger, even in the current situation, and even during this pandemic period. So today I'm really glad to be joined by four relatively recent alumni from the School of Economics who currently work in the sector. And they are very keen to share with all our students and the rest of people in the audience all their experiences and provide you with some valuable advice. So I would like to start alphabetically. So I would like to start with Saleh Ahmed, who is currently working. He's in Bahrain at the moment, working in data analytics for Ahli United Bank. Saleh did a bachelor's in the School of Economics as well as his master's in 2018. So Saleh, would you like to tell us a bit about what you studied at university? What attracted what attracted your interest in data analysis, data management sector, and also your journey from university to your current work? So what your company is and what is your current role within the company?
All right. So I did both my bachelor's and master's at UEA. My bachelor's was in economics with accountancy, while my master's was in industrial economics. I graduated at 2017 for my bachelor's, and I completed my master's at 2018. Currently, I work at Ahli United Bank, which is the biggest financial institution of Bahrain, with activity in 8 different countries, including the UK. They've started to look at new monetization streams that are heavily linked with data and analytics, and hence they formed a new department, which I joined. Initially, I joined as a trainee, as a digital transformation trainee, but because I've shown some interest and passion in the field of data analytics, I got the opportunity to join the newly formed team. The responsibilities that I cover, because it's a new team, the way we started was to cover the business more on the end of the business intelligence side and the a lot of reporting and dashboarding, but also to identify opportunities, not necessarily using machine learning and statistical modeling, but through simple statistics. The reason I chose to specialize in the field of data was that this process of transforming raw data into insight. It was first when I studied merger simulation with Franco in my master's that I really thought that this was interesting, starting from the feature representation or the variable representation and all the way in a structured process to produce fairly accurate estimates of what could happen. I found this really interesting, and I think that this specific example resonated with me, and I thought that, well, I want to do more like this. So yeah, that's my bet.
Great, Saleh. Thank you a lot. So following alphabetically to Matt Poawood also graduated from the School of Economics in 2016 with a bachelor's degree in economics. So Matt, would you like to share yours?
Yeah, so as George said, I studied just straight economics at UEA, graduating in 2016, and now I currently work for AKQA, who are a design and technology consultancy. So they kind of cover off both sides of media campaigns with clients, where we do the creative side for innovative adverts, then also have the data to kind of help turn this into something useful. My day-to-day role is kind of a mix of things. So I do some web analytics. So I look at how people interact with our clients' websites, help identify pain points of where people kind of bump into common problems. If you've ever been on a website and it's kind of a bit subpar, so kind of helping with that aspect of making it a seamless journey on a website. I also do analysis of marketing spend and marketing performance. So if a company is using various paid medias, look at what's working, what's not working, how can their spend be used more efficiently, and then also kind of a larger bucket at the end is a bit of technical support. So we help our clients with the actual collection of the data from the website, storage of data with data warehouses, and then any kind of technical issues they have with the actual analytic platforms they use themselves. We kind of act as a support center for that. My first job out of university was a similar role. It was for a media agency, which it wasn't the intended plan. I was originally going to go down like more of a financial route, but it was kind of quite competitive. And then just by chance, really, a friend from school worked at this media agency and said they're looking for analysts, you should apply. So I applied and got the role. So I was there for 2.5 years doing something very similar. And then I was approached by a recruiter for a job at Arsenal Football Club. So I left and worked at Arsenal Football Club for a year, which was, again, doing a similar role. But going from an agency to a client side was kind of a big culture shock, because things were a lot more sedate paced, and a surprisingly small team running, which is obviously quite a big brand. And then I only joined my most recent company in December, so about 6 months into this company. Really enjoying it. And then the reason I got into data analytics, I suppose, is kind of I've always enjoyed behavioral economics. So the only books I really read, I don't read that much, but when I do, it's kind of behavioral economics. So the understanding of everyday human behavior is quite interesting to me. And obviously, an analyst role, you get to identify this in like finding patterns in data or understanding why people are doing what they're doing, and then translating that into useful information.
Thank you a lot, Matt. And Matt, did you say that you moved recently back to Norwich?
Yes, I did. So when I graduated, I moved to London, and I was there for just under 5 years. And then the lockdown obviously started last year, and I was living in Arsenal, and kind of a mix of rent prices for what you get in London was ridiculous, like room rent. So then it was kind of a mix of my partner's actually started at UEA as well, as a mature student of kind of my recommendation. And so I wanted to move outside of London. So it seemed like a good idea just for kind of a quality of life thing. And I think we're going to touch on it later, but obviously the whole lockdown thing, our role was very easily done remotely. You don't need to be in the office very often. My largest clients are also based in Sweden, so even if I was in the office, I wouldn't see them face to face. So I decided to make a move for kind of a quality of life thing. But my office is still based in London, so when lockdown's over, I have to do 1 or 2 days in the office. But
yeah, but great to have you back to Norwich.
Yes,
hopefully we'll see you soon in person.
Yes, I'll be sure to come for a beer at this union.
Thank you, Matt. So following up with Adam Gumrasi, who graduated in 2017 from the School of Economics. Adam?
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot for having me, George. So yeah, as you said, I completed my bachelor's at the University of East Anglia in 2017 in pure economics. As part of that, I kind of took on a few modules to do with the more statistical and mathematical side of the discipline. So I took the mathematical economics module, as well as the econometrics and the further econometrics. So kind of, I guess the reason that I got into data analytics and data science was kind of a combination of doing those modules and realizing that this is something that I actually find incredibly interesting. Doing things like just in the beginning, like simple linear regressions and logistics regressions, and realizing kind of the inferential power that you have at your disposal once you know a few simple techniques. I just found it very interesting. And then also kind of being an avid reader of a lot of technology news, seeing lots of places quoting that data scientist is the sexiest job of the 21st century, and all of these new applications of data science and data analytics that are suddenly flooding into different sectors kind of made me realize that, okay, this is definitely something that I would be interested in pursuing going forward. So at my company right now, 140, we are a due diligence company. So essentially what that means is we provide help to private equity companies to understand if an asset that they're planning on investing in is kind of a solid asset, if there are any flags about the way in which they operate that might change the decision of the investment company as to whether this is a good asset or not to invest in. And so our focus is primarily coming at this from an outside-in perspective. So we will use a lot of, kind of similar to Matt, where we'll work with a lot of web analytics. We'll also, look at kind of the marketing performance of different brands. And we'll also take a look at things like social media mentions, online reviews and such, to try and build a holistic online picture of the particular assets that we're looking at and benchmark them against each other. And you can kind of get into quite granular detail with such things as trying to find different ways of actually judging how many users might convert on like a given website, i.e. someone who is actually making is actually completing a purchase, for example. And there's a number of different ways in which you can do things to try and really assert from an outside-in methodology as to how to try and assert proxies of things like revenue, for example. So where I'm at in my career at the moment is I went back to university last year to do a master's in data science. I kind of realized that the analytics stuff was something that I'm very interested in, something that I want to pursue further. But I think that especially if you kind of want to be doing, I guess, a lot of machine learning stuff, it's really beneficial to kind of have that additional kind of academic structure to like the way in which you think, and like to make sure that you kind of really robustly understand many different aspects of machine learning. So for me, I felt that it was very beneficial for me to go back to university to gain those additional skills and kind of bring them back and apply them in what I'm doing right now. So where I'm at the moment is I am the data science manager at 140. And so we are looking to introduce, we are currently introducing a new product in our range, whereas usually we will, historically we've been kind of creating these reports for private equity companies, these due diligence reports. Now we're kind of trying to make this more holistic online environment where a client can see very clearly lots of different data points, digital data points for different brands that they're interested in, and that's something that can update and also show advanced analytics over the top of that. So I'm kind of managing, first of all, a lot of the data extraction, the migration of our systems over to AWS, and also then layering on top of that a lot of these advanced analytics. And when I say advanced analytics, I'm talking things like models to make predictions as to what's going to happen in the future, and also a lot of the things that we will do around that will be around classifying different observations. So it might be that we're looking at different comments that people are making and trying to classify them into different topic areas and things like that. Yeah, and that's about it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks a lot, Adam. So I was saying that that's a very interesting journey, but we'll come back to the masters that you did also in data science, because this is always a question that students ask about the importance of doing a master's. We'll come back to this later on. So last but not least, Sam Novacek, who also did a bachelor's degree graduating in 2018 from the School of Economics. Yes, Sam?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks, George. I hope you can all hear me well. Yeah, I also graduated in, like Adam, and in pure economics in 2018. Actually, our journey, Adam, is going to be quite similar because I was immediately attracted to the kind of more technical aspects of economics. And I think that's the beauty of economics in general. I mean, it's the study of, in a very high level, is the study of how people make decisions, and to understand how people make decisions can be done from a behavioral aspect, from a technical aspect, from a macro and micro aspect. So I was really drawn towards the different modules. So I also did mathematical economics and econometrics and derivatives and financial risk management, which I found was incredible. Just the stuff you can do with a combination of technical knowledge and interest, as well as like the fundamental economics knowledge, is what kind of drove me to being interested in I would say after my bachelor's, I was really just interested in doing something technical. I wouldn't say I was necessarily interested in being in data as a data analyst. So I did a master's where in London, where I was exposed to kind of the applied aspects of economics. So the importance of being innovative, of being digitalization, and how that can impact your strategy as a company or as an individual, and how all of that combined is what gives you a competitive advantage. So immediately I was kind of hooked on some of these specific modules, and we were given a work placement. And from there, I kind of just fell in love with the idea of like building things, of creating insights, and just always pushing the boundary. And I think as economics students, I'm not sure if everyone on this call is an economics student or not, but as economics students, we all have this like really good benefit in that we're in between being technical and like mathematically minded, and also like standard social science. So like we understand psychology and all that. So after my master's, I got a job at Bloomberg, and I was there immediately. I was a data analyst in global data. And the great part about a company like Bloomberg is that it's very holistic. So you have people from all types of backgrounds, and it allows people to exchange ideas a lot. Now, the great part about, I don't know, being a data analyst, but in general about working for a company like this, is that it's not necessarily an expectation to be incredibly technical, but you actually have to have that drive. So immediately I knew that my way to get forward in this kind of game of being a good data analyst is to learn programming. And I'm not the type of person who thinks you have to study computer science to be good at coding. You just have to understand how things work and how to problem solve and how algorithms can work. So immediately I just put myself on specific projects. So while at Bloomberg, I would try to figure out ways I can work a little bit after hours or during my free time to kind of make interesting tools to assess data and data quality. And I did that all in Python and VBA and SQL. So it was kind of a good journey for me. After Bloomberg, I immediately started wanting to like focus a little bit more. I think I wanted to kind of take it one step further and be in a role where I can really make a difference. So that's why I applied to Fitch. So I'm currently working at Fitch Group. Fitch Group is overall it's the group that Fitch Ratings is part of. So it creates the credit ratings for entities all over the world in different sectors. There's also an aspect of Fitch Group called Fitch Solutions, which really brings kind of an analytical aspect to that complements Fitch Ratings, and there are many products around that we bring to clients. So being part of Fitch Group, I work in between Fitch Ratings and Fitch Solutions, and it's immediately I was put into the position where I had the opportunity to kind of be innovative, find the best way to take ownership of my process. So specifically, I'm a data analyst, but I'm more specifically working on financial data templates or models, where I'm essentially responsible for building out new ones, maintaining them, and kind of enhancing and fixing issues that arise. I'm also involved as well, partly in automating data collection, which has been an excellent experience and very interesting one. And I'm also just looking at ways to kind of push my knowledge in not just programming, but in understanding data and how data can drive value to the company that you work for. So Fitch currently here for a year, and it's been an excellent experience so far. And I think the great part about working for a company like Fitch, for example, is that you're constantly being pushed to see what you can do. So I think as an economist, it's a great environment to be in, where finance meets data, because you know a little bit about the both sides of things. And I think that's what kind of drove me to get here, because yeah, everything I've learned has kind of got me into being technically minded, but also not forgetting about my economics knowledge. So yeah, kind of a little bit of everything there.
Great, Sam. Thanks a lot. You mentioned about doing a master's in London. Did you say whether this was in economics or in data science?
So my master's was at Imperial, but it was in economics more. So it wasn't data science, but the great part about this master's is it was very industry focused. So it encouraged aspects of data science, but it wasn't a pure data science master's, no.
Okay, great. So I'm really glad we have quite a variety of different roles, which actually the data science sector is such broad sector. So I'm glad that we have people that cover different areas within that sector. And I think we'll get a lot of great insights today. So you covered a lot about your day-to-day roles, what you do on the day-to-day basis. So I would like to move on directly to providing some advice to students. For example, what skills do you view as essential for the data analysis sector, as far as you know from your journey so far? What are those skills and attributes you think students would need to develop at this stage to be successful in this sector? I would like to start with Sam, going backwards now. Sam?
That's a good question. So what I've seen from my personal experience is the most vital, and it may sound very cliche, but the most vital skill you have to have is Excel. I think people can say that that it's all about coding and programming, which it's kind of more of the future. But at the end of the day, Excel is probably single-handedly the most important tool, at least from my experience, because I think it's a good way. I think if you can work in Excel, you understand data structures on a basic level, because at the end of the day, things are kind of in tables when it comes to different databases, for example. So I think if you know Excel and you know how conditionals work, and you even mess about a bit with VBA, you get yourself a good foundational knowledge for like the next step, which in my view is, for example, Python or some other sort of a technical skill set. So I would say Excel, but also you really have to, I don't know if it's more of a skill, but you really have to just be open to everything. You really have to you can't look down upon certain things. Some people might look down upon using Excel all the time, but I think it's an incredibly useful tool, and you can't be afraid of different things as well. So I mean, learning new softwares or systems is what it really takes to work in data, and different companies operate different systems. So you really have to be open to learning the ins and outs of it and becoming like a master in what you do.
Right. Thank you a lot, Sam. So you talk about Excel. Did you, when you finished university, at least from your bachelor's degree, do you think you had these skills, or you acquired these skills later on through your work experience?
Yeah, generally working on different papers while at university at UEA, I generally had a decent knowledge of Excel, just using it and having internships and all that. But I think you really get, well, at least from my personal experience, I really got much better at Excel when I was during the times when I was like applying for my first jobs, when I saw it was like a big requirement, like different specific functions. And then like that first set of months in my first kind of experience is when I really started getting much better at it. And I think something like Excel, you really get good at when you're reliant on it. I think you have to really need to see what it can do and how you really need it all the time in order to get good at it. As I said, though, I still view Excel as like a fundamental foundation. It's not, it's always going to be around, but you always have to, back to my last point, you always have to be open to learning new things. So if you don't have a lot of technical skills, Excel is always if you don't have a lot of technical experience, Excel is always the best place to start.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Adam, what is your view on this? Not about Excel, about in general, about skills, essential skills for the sector.
Yeah, so I think I would just add to that as well, that because I think a lot of the time people think of Excel as something that they're already an expert in, because for a lot of people it's like, oh, I learned Excel in like early like secondary school, maybe even primary school, like at first doing a couple of things, like, oh, I've done Excel for so long, like I understand it in and out. You probably don't. You probably don't. There's an incredible amount of stuff that you can do in terms of with macros and VBA, etc. That you really can do almost anything in Excel, any sort of data related task. So when you hear that and you kind of go like, well, that's a checklist I know at Excel. It's like you potentially don't, and it's potentially worth looking into in a little bit more depth. Especially stuff to do with like coding and VBA. I guess in general, I'd like to also add to that I would say that I definitely agree that there isn't specific tool that you have to know in and out, and a lot of the time with different roles there'll be different tools that you want to use, and also because it's such an evolving sector, you can definitely expect that the tools that are seen as the core tools to use will absolutely change many times over the coming decade or so. That being said, I think it's important to have, I guess, a little bit of like the programmer's mindset, even if it's not, oh, I know C++ in and out or whatever. To getting down, some knowledge in, I would say Python is usually a very good place to start. But even things like, using VBA, using SQL, they really help to kind of, I guess, ground your thinking in this kind of systematic way, and like understanding how to go back and debug errors and kind of have this algorithmic thinking. I think that I guess algorithmic thinking is what I would say is the thing that is like very necessary. I guess an ability to kind of decompose a task into smaller pieces that you can then kind of work on individually, and also being able to kind of go back and think critically and debug like exactly, oh, so something isn't working here. Can I pinpoint exactly where the issue in my logic is? I would say, as vague as it sounds, like that is what is really useful for being a data analyst. It's not so much about the tools, because you can go on for ages saying like, oh yeah, you need to know Python, you need to know R, you need to know Tableau, you need to understand how to use all of the different cloud softwares, etc. Like and I think a lot of the time when you look at the way that the discussion happens online, a lot of the time it really does feel like you need to know all of these tools, which I think a lot of the time intimidates some people and will kind of push them away from the sector, because like, oh, there's no way that I'm going to learn all of these different things. It really isn't that. Pick a couple of things that you think are interesting, maybe do a project with them, just a personal project, to be like, hey, I made this cool thing using Python, or hey, I did this cool thing using VBA, etc. And that is, in my mind, a lot more valuable than kind of just diving in and being like, well, Adam said I need to learn 10 different things, so I'm going to go off and watch a load of Coursera courses now. That's just my opinion.
Yep. Thank you, Adam. So yeah, important lesson that we shouldn't underestimate the importance of Excel. It's still one of the most important tools in the market. And of course, we need to be adaptable. We need to have the drive to learn new things and to understand this algorithm, to get this algorithmic mindset. And then once you get this, then you can learn all the tools more easily. Thanks, Adam. So Matt, what do you think about general skills in the sector?
Yeah, I mean, to start, I totally agree with Adam saying you think you know Excel well, and then you start seeing people who've been in the industry for a while, and then what they can do with it is amazing. But then also as well, I was going to say, similar to Adam, in the way that obviously if there are lots of tools out there, if you choose a handful, and I was going to say the same thing, if you have some of your university work, there's a lot of data and stuff, you can find one of the visualization tools and build your own little thing and play around with, even for your schoolwork. I mean, I don't know what George will think of this. If you have alternative ways of presenting your uni work, just as a way of getting to use new tools, But also I think something that's quite important, because at least from my role anyway, I do a lot of presenting to the clients, and obviously it varies from like my corresponding person who's also an analyst to kind of the C-suite level, and it's a lot of varying like knowledge base of the technical data. So you need to be able to kind of translate all of your findings into layman's terms, because if you can't translate your 20-page PowerPoint, which is really detailed, into kind of someone who's very senior and don't get them to understand it in the buy-in, then kind of it's never going to get off the ground. So kind of maybe a good way to kind of practice this is, dependent on your parents, if they're technically savvy, try explaining some of your university work to them and kind of breaking it down into a simple way of translating what all of this, your, I don't know, 5,000 words project is, basically breaking it down into its key parts and kind of making sure they understand it and what key takeaways they have. Because I think there's I've come across a lot of people who are great at this, and then a lot of people who are some of the greatest minds I've ever worked with, but they just struggle. All they know is technical talk, and they can't quite translate it to someone who may be less technically inclined. So I think that's something that'd be quite good to learn. But then again, just touching on what the others said, you don't have to learn all the tools, just pick a couple, especially now you're at university where you have a bit more time, because once you start working, like Sam touched on, he was having to like lose all of his, like not all of his free time, but as in dipping into lunch breaks, working after, like staying late after work. Once you start working, you'll have a lot to learn. So use the time you have at university to try and upskill something. So maybe over the summer, say I want to learn the basics of X, and just kind of give yourself a bit of a pet project.
Great, Matt. Thanks a lot.
If I could just add to that, that
Yes.
is a very good point what Matt made, because if I was in everyone's shoes still doing bachelors, I would spend like all my free time, or a lot of my free time, at the libraries, just teaching myself, either getting a lot better at Excel, or like even getting ahead of the game with like something more complicated like Python or something. I think if I had that foundation a lot earlier, who knows how much more advanced I would have been now. So I think that's a really good key point that you made there.
It doesn't
lose a lot of,
you can fun projects learning this stuff. Just have like a pet project.
And touching on the ability to communicate technical findings into kind of a simpler language, I know how important this is, but I know at the same time it's difficult to understand how to do it. Would you have any advice of how to get this understanding of how to get something very technical and translate it into simple terms?
I think obviously kind of talking to people outside of your course, maybe who obviously don't have the knowledge on economics, maybe try and explain to them some of the key principles of economics. Also sometimes reading like articles or magazines, because obviously publications like The Economist or CTAM, these are publications that have kind of a lot of technical information, but obviously condensed down because it's meant for like your coffee break at work or something. Then obviously you kind of get the gist of how you can kind of translate more complex things just by either reading or even just practicing by kind of when you talk to your housemates, if you're not all on the same course, just trying to say, oh, this is what we learned about today, and just break it down into kind of the simple key takeaway points.
Great, Matt. Thank you a lot. Saleh, would you like to share your insights on skills in the sector?
Yeah, well, as important as technical skills are, at the end of the day, they sit on the core skills, which are problem solving and creative thinking at the end of the day. So as Adam said, the algorithmic thinking is a specific way of problem solving. So after all, it's a problem that you try to dice and find the solution to technically. So what I would like to say is that I think that technical skills are important, but learning them, as Adam said, should be through practice and finding problems and trying to solve them. My first experience with this was actually during my master's dissertation, which was about Delta Northwest merger, the airline merger. And for my dissertation, I had to, probably 70% of my time working on the dissertation was purely refining the data and working through it, because even though it's publicly available, it's fairly a complex data set. And I enjoyed the process, and I learned a lot, because I was using Stata, but I've used functions and commands and loops in a way that I haven't used during my studies. And I thought that if I was to learn all this just by viewing courses, it would have been much more difficult. But because I was doing it for a problem-solving purpose, I enjoyed it, and at the end of the day, I learned a lot. And similarly, now I'm doing an academic course with the University of Edinburgh, and I didn't have any background knowledge about Python, but given the problems that are studied, I found it quite interesting and easy to progress and to understand how to structure my code into algorithms and ways that will help me solve the problem. And also the communication skills in my current job are very important, because most of what I do is sitting with business stakeholders and understanding the problems that they face, be it product development or business development. It can get very detailed and very domain specific. So I have to understand these specifics before I can dig into the data. So it's also a two-way communication. So you have to be a good listener. You have to know the dynamics of the domain that you're working in, because if you didn't quite understand the domain, you may risk spending a lot of time doing something that isn't very accurate. So yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you, Saleh. Okay, yeah, that's great. So I understand how important all these skills are, and I think a lot of students that are interested in the sector, and given, although it is quite a broad sector, and there is a lot of demand, it's still a very competitive sector, right? And I would like, if you had any insight on what additional experience students you think would gain throughout the university life, so that they set them apart from other candidates. So since it's a very competitive sector, what other, apart from the skills that you mentioned, what other experiences you think students should get at this stage? Whoever wants to say anything about this?
I'll chip in the comment. I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about skills like coding, learning different platforms, but all three of the different companies I've worked at, they've had one interview just dedicated to personality and you as an individual. So like, don't get so focused on having a CV that looks amazing. Also like be kind of, it's also a cliche term, but well-rounded, like have a social life and be happy and passionate to share and talk about your topics, because at the end of the day, they want to, like, if you're going to be working and stuck next to someone for like, I don't know, 40 to 50 hours a week, you want to be like an interesting person. So kind of, you don't have to just focus on kind of academia and work experience, just kind of have other interests outside of this, and kind of don't be afraid to talk about them, because the amount of different interests I've come across people like working with is kind of amazing. And it's kind of quite interesting to see, because even though you're kind of a similar set and similar backgrounds, everyone's interested in different things. So I mean, don't be afraid to work on the things that aren't necessarily kind of what you think look great on a CV. Just like help make yourself more rounded.
Thanks, Matt.
I'll say one point. If I one thing I saw that helped me stand out just after graduating from my master's was and it may be difficult to put together, but I think it's showing that you're not just interested in some of the cliches of data and analytics. So like, I mean, obviously a big part of analytics and data science is discovering new insights, but a lot of it is also documentation, managing, running your own system, a network of items, like running for example, we use Jira a lot. So like operating different pages and being very good at being very organized, and good at documenting things. So I think if, let's say, I don't know, let's say you were writing a cover letter, or if you were in an interview, or you were just trying to focus on skills to develop before applying to, let's say, an internship or something, I think, be open to show that you're interested in some of the less sexy things about data science, because at the end of the day, they're actually some of these like management aspects of data is, if not the most important part of being a data scientist to some extent. So I think you have to always view how your character can contribute to mitigating operational risk for the company you're applying for. And as long as they see that, that you're very organized and that you're keen to look at, to be involved in every aspect of what you're doing, then they're going to see I think what I've seen is that they'll see some interest in that. As I said, it's hard to put that together, but I think you really have to show that you're keen to understand every aspect of the data cycle. So yeah, that's some piece of advice I would give.
Thank you, Sam.
And I think coming off of the back of that as well, one thing that I've found very useful is just kind of trying to engross yourself in different aspects of the sector just through social media. Try just following a few different companies or a few different influencers or notable people in the sector, and you'll just have them there every time you go onto your LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or something. You'll just have them there, and you'll kind of get these little nuggets of information about new services that people are using, new models or types, ways of thinking that a lot of like the kind of the bigger dudes in like artificial intelligence are having at the moment. Exactly. And just kind of getting a flavor for what direction the sector is going in. I think that is super important, because it just kind of, when it actually comes down to having like the conversational part of the interview, to kind of be able to really naturally just kind of be like, oh yeah, I saw that this thing's going on, and like, oh, I think that's really interesting because it could mean X, Y, Z. I think immediately just shows that, okay, you're not just a person who decided I want this job, so I'm going to go through and tick all the boxes that everyone says that I need to tick. You actually kind of you show that you're really just interested and you just want to be here and you're excited about the work.
Great segue from that. I think obviously you can stand out on a CV, but you only get one shot of first impression. So like your first interview is really important. So obviously like basic things like obviously make sure you turn up slightly early, but not painfully early, because that really irritates hiring managers. Obviously be well dressed, and then also kind of obviously interviews are kind of, you get used to them and good practice. So when I was looking for a job, I actually went to job interviews that I didn't want the job for, just as a way of, it's interview practice. You know, they're going to get better interview practice than actually going to a real job interview, even if you don't particularly want the job, because they're all fairly similar. So I went to probably about 5 to 10 interviews that I didn't want the job for, just as a way of kind of getting used to the process, get the nerves out of the way. So then when it does come to, oh, this is my dream job, I'd love this, you're just used to the process, you feel a lot more comfortable. And also kind of little things like always research the company thoroughly, research the person interviewing you, so you know their background, if you have any common interests, or like kind of, obviously don't freak them out and mention, oh, I saw you studied here, but just kind of a general background. And also be polite to everyone you see at the company. Like a lot of people kind of don't really pay much attention to office managers, but then like they're always the first people that go back and feedback to hiring managers. They're like, oh, they're super polite, this, that, and the other. So just kind of your first impression does count, because a lot of it is kind of like a gut feeling as well as how you portray yourself.
Thanks, Matt. So I would move on to my next question, unless Saleh, you want to say something? Yeah, of course, go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that studying economics and having a lot of professors in economics and lecturers who are doing research, many of them, I'm pretty sure, would want some hand dealing with the data and manipulating it. I think for students this could be very useful experience. to know how to deal with the data, not in an taught academic context only, but also in practice. I joined something of the sort with Bahar just after I graduated, and I looked into many different examples of leveraging data in the electricity market, which I found interesting. And also a colleague of mine also worked with Bahar on analyzing data for the North Show, I think. And so yeah, it's an opportunity that's right there, and I think that there are many lecturers and professors that would be open for students to work with them on their data. Isn't this right?
Yeah, just to mention, following up from Saleh, of course, we'll have some summer internships during the summer. Maybe any of you did have a summer internship here at the school. I don't remember. Maybe Saleh did. But we're going to have some summer internships. A few of them hopefully will have to do with data analysis. So just keep in mind an eye on. So at some point I will be advertising this type of opportunities. And we didn't talk about work experience. How important do you think work experience is during your university? And given now that the number of internships has dropped following the pandemic, whether you think doing all this, getting the experience and the training, we can still do it by using some online platforms. Do you think this is a viable option as well? Instead of getting the internship, you can still get some experience and knowledge through other training? Matt?
I mean, I didn't get an internship before starting my career because I was very naively ambitious and applied to internships at like the 4 major banks. So, but I think from my perspective, it wasn't essential as long as you because obviously you have an interview process and you have aptitude skills. But I mean, most graduate jobs, it's not essential because it's part of a graduate scheme or an entry job. So you do have a lot of training on the job. They don't, at least my employees, you've never been expected to like already be good at your job because obviously it's your first like graduate job, proper job out of university. So if you just kind of work on the elements you can, and obviously because of the COVID, it'll probably be even more understandable if you haven't had an internship. So you can just use it to your advantage and in the interview and say, you might see that I don't have an internship, but that's because it's been limited by this, but I have done X. And then you can show that you've learned to do this or use this platform and kind of further your skills in other areas to show that you will be proactive in kind of upskilling yourself, and don't just say, oh, well, I didn't get an internship because of this, so whatever. But so I don't think it's essential. If you can get one, great, because I also think one of the alternative helpfulness of internships is I know friends who've had them and it's made them realize that that's not what they wanted to do for work. So you get a snapshot of working analytics or working in finance, and after 2 months you might say, actually this isn't for me. And I mean, that's fine because obviously you only know if you're going to like something when you try it properly. So that could be one benefit to internships, but I don't think they're essential.
If I could just add to that, I completely agree that they're not essential because and I would actually agree about the fact that nowadays they're going to be even more understanding if you don't have one. I think Adam mentioned something in the beginning that always do like your own projects, even if it's for fun or not, because the first project I've ever kind of done to kind of help myself learn, but also help myself stand out because it's an interesting talking point, is I wanted to build like a machine learning model to predict the number of times a word showed up on the internet. But I wasn't a genius at machine learning, but I guess like that process took months, but it was just like, it's showing that I want to learn something. So I think like I did have an internship, but the role I'm in now is a little bit different, if not completely different from the internship that I've had. So I think that goes back to Matt's point that it might show you that you don't want to do something. Another thing is, I think sometimes people get too attracted to the idea of like a grad scheme or an internship. I think you have to also not be afraid of other things. They're called projects. So a lot of companies out there are recruiting for projects, and you can do a project for a month, for a week, for 2 days, for half a year. And there's different recruiters online that literally hire people who are still at uni or just graduated to do projects for them. These projects can be just writing a report for them. You don't even have to show up to the office. Sometimes they will be to go to the office. So I think there's so many different channels to get some sort of experience, whether you want to do a project for yourself and just write your own paper, or do a project for a company or for somebody. I think there's other channels other than just the classic grad program or 2-month summer analyst internship. That's something I would say.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I have to admit, it's first time I hear that there are these kind of projects available as well. I know a lot of, instead of internships, they would offer some kind of training, like part-time training, but I haven't heard of that you can get involved in a particular project. Is that as a freelancer?
I wouldn't even say it's a freelancer. I would say it would be more of like on the lines of like a temporary worker. So maybe if that's what you would define a freelancer, but companies like, I know someone from my master's, he had no relevant work experience. He, other than like a model United Nations, which is great, but he did a project for Bain, the consultancy, and he wrote, I think it was a project of like writing a research report almost for them, if I'm not mistaken. So these are very available. I know the ones in London. If you're not based in London, I'm sure there's all around the world. They do this kind of stuff. So I think they're called projects, but I don't know if you'd be classified as a freelancer, something like that.
Thank you, Sam. So what is your opinion, guys, about having a postgraduate qualification? How important it is, or do you think you can get all this knowledge through your working experience anyway?
Can I quickly say something on that? Just because I think it bounces off of what I was saying. One thing I would change about what I've done in the past was and I'm not sure if Adam, you've done this, but I would have preferred that direction, was to get some work experience and then do a master's. I just jumped straight into my master's after, because I guess I kind of wanted to do that course. I wanted to be in London. I would say that no, for your first job, master's is not necessary. But to get into the role you want, I would actually say a master's is very important if you want to get that role you want. But I don't think you have to do it ASAP. I think you could work for a bit, get some of that fundamental knowledge and confidence of working in the workplace, and then go do a master's when you're, I don't know, 26 or something.
And hopefully you get a job where your employer is willing to fund your master's.
Yeah, even that. Or I know people who've completely said goodbye to the company they work for. I'm not saying do this, but and did a master's because they desperately wanted to take that next step. So there's so many different opportunities when you wait a little bit longer.
Yeah. Adam, is there anything about your data science master's that you've done?
I guess I'd start by saying, I'm glad that you brought that up, Sam, because honestly, it was an incredible decision to kind of postpone doing a master's before and kind of get used to working in the sector beforehand, because it really gave me a chance to understand what it was that I was good at, what it is that I enjoyed, and really what it is that I kind of wanted as well from work. So kind of by the time that I actually started doing my master's, I had a really rigorous understanding of what it was that I wanted to achieve there and why it was that I was doing it. So I definitely think that for me anyway, that taking that break was a great idea. I would say, however, I do know that it is a case that it can sometimes be it's not as easy as it sounds to just kind of get used to working, get used to having like a full-time job, and you're paying for your apartment, and you have kind of like the nicer things in life, and the idea of going back to then just kind of being a student again is definitely something that's difficult. But I also think that it's something that is a lot more realistic than people think a lot of the time. I think a lot of people tend to think that, that's it, I've gone off into employment now, I'd be going like maybe backwards to start doing this, and then
think Adam is frozen, or is it just for me?
Frozen for me as well.
Adam, you're gone for now. Adam, we lost you for a bit.
Terribly sorry, guys. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not sure entirely where I dropped off, but Yeah. So essentially, I think that sometimes people feel like maybe it's a difficult decision to go back to academia once you've already started working, but I really don't actually, first of all, think it's that serious. You can kind of jump over to this and then jump back over to academia again. But also, yeah, as I said, for me, I think it was just the best decision in and of itself, because it kind of gave me the opportunity to understand a little bit about how industry works before diving back in. In terms of the decision to do a data science degree in particular, I think it was incredibly beneficial to me, and I think it's possibly worth just caveating here kind of the difference between data analytics, machine learning, and then kind of being a research scientist, because I feel like these are very different things that kind of get blended together sometimes. So for data analytics, I feel like it's much more of like it's still a very technical discipline, but it requires a lot more kind of business acumen as well. So I would say for analytics, it's potentially best just kind of getting stuck in and getting yourself kind of the understanding of how business works, what exactly it is that clients want, how it is that you communicate with people effectively. I think that a lot of the time, these are like very, very important skills that if you kind of build from the get-go, it's going to really benefit you. In terms of a lot of the stuff to do with machine learning, there is a hell of a lot to learn, to be honest, in a lot of cases, looking at just the different types of models there are, looking into neural networks, tree-based models, but kind of Bayesian inference, lots and lots of different things that I think, I'm not to say it's not possible, but it can be quite a daunting thing to kind of try and do on the side, just as you have your kind of day job that you're doing. So I feel like for me, I knew that was a lot of it was something I was really interested in. It was something that I was kind of learning on the side regardless. And I was like, look, I think the best thing for me would be to take a year out and actually pursue a postgraduate degree and kind of know that I am just going to be learning this and just doing projects, and this is the sole thing that I'm focusing on. So I think that was really great. Another thing that I mentioned there was the kind of term research scientist, which I think is something, I don't know if it's a new thing, but it's something that I've noticed kind of being a term that's being used a lot more frequently in the last couple of years.
What was the term, Adam?
Which is
research scientist?
Research scientist. So it's just kind of, it seems to have, a lot of jobs that were previously being called data scientists, I see are being called research scientists now. And a lot of the time what this will actually kind of mean is it's kind of using looking at kind of building advanced neural network models and such, and like kind of making new architectures. And it's the sort of role that you would be looking to do if you want to do data science with a big technology company, with a Facebook or a Google or an Amazon. So just to caveat that, if that is something that you're interested in, a PhD is kind of what you want to do. So if you want to work in data science for one of the kind of big 5 technology companies, I would highly recommend kind of even thinking now the PhD is the route to go. But yeah, that being said, there is obviously a wide spectrum of roles within the sector that absolutely do not require a PhD and really don't require a master's either, to an extent.
Yeah, just following up again on the data science masters. How difficult was the technical level of your masters? So I know students, they would like to do a masters in data science, but they're a bit worried they have only the economics background. Would they be able to catch up with the technical level in the course?
So I would say that doing an economics degree, you're already kind of quite far up on the pyramid of kind of pivoting over to data science regardless, just because it gives you a lot of the analytical thinking. And I think there is a lot in terms of like the mathematical thinking as well that you kind of do gain from that. I would say if you do economics and you in particularly you took the focused route of like, doing the econometrics and further econometrics modules, that you're pretty much in a good position to kind of jump straight onto a data science degree. If you didn't do the kind of the statistical or mathematical modules, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. I would say usually people that come into a data science masters, they have either got some sort of like kind of statistical foundations that they're building on, or B, they've got some sort of kind of computer science or programming experience that they're building up on. That doesn't mean to say that you have to have done a mathematical based degree or a computer science degree in order to jump onto this. It's just that if you haven't got either of those things, then again, I would go back to saying I think a personal project is very important there. Just trying to actually kind of learn a few of the skills yourselves in terms of like some basic programming or doing a project or such. If without any of these things, I think it probably would be quite a struggle to jump onto it. But if you've got any of those bases covered, then I think as long as you've kind of got like the right mindset to pursue a postgraduate degree, then yeah, like it's definitely something that's achievable.
Thanks, Adam. So at this stage, I would like to ask the audience if anybody has any questions. I have plenty of questions to ask, but if there is something in particular you would like to cover.
Yes, I'll the flag for people who haven't had postgraduate degree because I only did my undergraduate. So from my point of view, it hasn't. I'm more along data analytics, like Adam mentioned, kind of more a lot about how the business works and user behavior and dealing with people. So it hasn't hampered me in the same way when you're at school, A levels or everything. Get to university, and then my degree got me my first job, but then after that, my degree hasn't even been brought up. It's just what have you done at your previous job. So if you don't want to do a master's or PhD, don't worry, it won't. Unless you want to go something down like the real data science route, like Adam says, then it might be beneficial. But other than that, it hasn't affected me. But yeah, just wanted to fly the flag for the non-postgraduate.
Yep. So another thing I would like to ask out of curiosity, because I've been teaching data analysis for a few years in the university level, both a bachelor's and master's. How much do you think the thing you learned at university differ from what you applied at work? And also, how important do you think this data analysis knowledge you got from university helped you understand how to use data in the more practical way that you have to use at work? Anybody would like to comment on that? Saleh, if you want, or
obviously there is a lot of overlap in terms of the analytical thinking, and however, the question I think is a bit different in the economic framework, where you would leverage economic theory a lot compared to the data science domain, where you would try to apply some domain knowledge in your feature representation, and then of course the way you would deal with the modeling is much more independent, because at the end of the day, what you care about is getting a clear prediction or clear description of the variables or the aspects that you are looking at, regardless of the causality or the economics or the aspects that an economist would be interested in. So that's what I think.
So Saleh, do you think economists have an advantage over other data scientists in terms of they also understand the modeling and the causal channels that create relationships in the world?
It isn't necessarily an advantage. It's just what economists would choose to look at. Because, for example, I did a master's in industrial economics, and much of what the models that industrial economists would use for prediction is to understand how a merger, for instance, would impact the market. Whereas from a corporate view, now that I work in a bank, their objective is to maximize their revenue. They wouldn't care what aspects would change, so long that they would maximize customer profitability, that they would target more profitable customers. And for that, we would segment customers in a way that would help the business to achieve this goal. Whereas in economics, you would like to understand in detail what would cause these shifts. And for example, in the example of merger simulation, you would want to understand where do the cost efficiencies come from, and you would like to understand the market dominance impact. So these are very theoretical terms that you are concerned with that may not be very material in real life. But I think in practice, you care about the material and results way more.
Thank you, Saleh. So guys, if you went back to university and you had the power to recommend a course, a module that you think would be important for people who would like to follow this career path, apart from studying general econometrics, is there a kind of a course you would recommend the university to add as a part of the curriculum? Yes.
Oh, sorry. Just because my master's course had this aspect that drove me into being interested and understanding what's needed from a person to be successful and desired in data science. I would say like a qualitative approach to how technology can improve a company, a financial company, for example. So I think I obviously like quantitative courses and technical aspects, but you said to leave out like econometrics and all that. So I'd say if you had like a sort of like digital economics course that taught about not machine learning in depth, but like what machine learning can do at a high level. Because I think a lot of the times the challenge is, if you're working with a neural network or a clustering model, like what can that do? When do you need to apply that? When will that be the right approach? So I think if you had sort of like, maybe not a full module, but like some courses on digital economics and how that, and apologies if you do have that, and how that at a high level does help a business, I think that would be really, really good.
We have a module economics on the digital age, but I'm not sure how relevant it is with machine learning. But we do have something in the third year.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So again, I would like, if anybody has any questions that I haven't covered, please feel free to add it. So we already passed it's been like 15 minutes more than what we're supposed to, but I would like to end with a couple of questions more, if possible. So the first one is, what do you think is the future of the sector post-COVID? How do you think this sector is going to grow more, or what's your opinion?
I think obviously like the analytics has been kind of growing more and more anyway, but I think with the lockdown, it's forced a lot of businesses to kind of focus more on their online businesses. So obviously the pool of data you have is only going to get bigger. Even because two of my biggest clients are automotive, and they've had to launch like virtual car showrooms, virtual talks with the car salesmen. So kind of businesses that weren't necessarily going to be digitally focused beforehand. There's a huge emphasis to shift towards having a strong digital presence. So obviously you're going to need data analysts to kind of help this in progress. So I think it's only going to make the industry bigger.
Yes, Matt, that's my opinion as well. Anybody else would like to touch on this? No?
I think every role is going to be analytical at one point. I think you could turn any role, in certain space, I think you could turn any role into a data analytical role, as long as you, I think companies are constantly looking for people to keep pushing the boundaries. So don't just look at your current role and think that's all you have to do. Always come up with new ideas. And when you come up with new ideas, you're going to be keeping up with that technological advancement that Matt just mentioned. I think a BCG study said that the virus hasn't pushed companies into a tangent and forced them to use technologies they've never used before. I think it's kind of pushed them 5 years in advance in terms of how advanced they are technically. So I think that's a good opportunity, because you can even get into data science or data analytics in a role that doesn't traditionally seem like it would be that. I think that's something I would say.
Great, Sam. Thank you a lot. Guys, do you have any other advice you would like to share with our students? I mean, we already covered a lot of important areas. Is there anything that you think we didn't manage to cover? Matt?
I mean, not to sound condescending, this kind of isn't as much about work, but it was kind of touched upon earlier about kind of going into the working world and coming back to education. But I think enjoy university as much as you can, because you won't get this opportunity to have sports, societies, everything right on your doorstep. I kind of look back with some regrets about some things. So yeah, not to sound condescending, but make the most of university.
I hope things will go back to normal next year. So students, first year students next year will have the opportunity to experience this university life as you did, and the rest
I'd say
of you guys.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Sam.
My audio is delayed. Sorry. I'd say be true to yourself. I know people who at Bloomberg, for example, who studied economics in undergrad and then became software engineers and did computer science, or vice versa. So I'd say be true to yourself. And that sounds cliche, but don't force yourself to do too much of this or too much of that. There's so many times where I miss sometimes where I miss applying pure economic concepts, and there's times where I don't want to think about them at all. But I think at the end of the day, you got to realize what you want. So just pick your target, and it's okay if you don't know what you want, but just like be true to yourself. Don't try to force something. Just do what you're good at and take your skills like that. As economists, we can do a lot of cool things. So yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Great insights. Adam, would you like to say something to close any concluding comments from your side?
Yeah, I guess one thing I would say is that it's very easy to be a generalist when it comes to data science and data analytics. It's very easy to kind of just toe the line and learn the things that that you're told that it is that you're meant to learn. And I need to learn this technology, that technology, this method, that method. But actually, what really makes someone an attractive hire, I think, is that kind of additional experience. And I think that's where, honestly, I genuinely think that as an economics student, you're kind of coming out of the gate with so many possibilities, just because economics is such a well-rounded subject that gives you a lot of the technical skill, but also a lot of like the behavioral understanding and a lot of the kind of the business context that really allows you to kind of thrive in this sort of environment. And yeah, so if you're kind of going head to head with someone who is coming at this from a purely technical perspective, you've already got a lot more to give. I think I cut out a couple of times there, so apologies if with the issues.
No, I think we heard everything properly. There was a bit of frozen, but it was okay. Saleh, would you have any concluding remarks as well?
Yeah, in the field of data science, I think that there can be some misconceptions because of how wide and deep the field is. So it depends on the organization that you work at, but you can have, because data is everywhere, you can have people who would ask you to do tasks that may not be what you would want to do, or what will help you going forward with your career. For example, an extreme example would be, well, I have people coming to me and giving me 2 Excel sheets and asking me to merge them. And I would say, why don't you just use VLOOKUP? Why are you coming to me with this? But because when non-technical people use data, there can be often misconceptions of what a data analyst would do. And there are many different aspects, such as data management and architecture or visualization, and not necessarily it will be the case that you want to specialize in all of these, and it would be difficult actually to specialize in all of these. So early on in your career, I think that it would be good to have an idea of where in data you want to position yourself, and probably for most economists, this would be towards the data modeling or the decision science or the research science, as Adam said, end of the spectrum. So I think that this is worth mentioning.
Thank you, Saleh. Matt, any concluding remarks from your side?
I think I kind of covered everything, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy for you to reach out to George and he can pass on my contact details. Or if you have a question that you remember at a later date or want any advice or anything, I'm here to help take advantage of the UEA, like alumni, especially on LinkedIn and things like that.
Yes, of course. So, yes.
Can I say one more point, George?
Yeah,
one
yes,
point I want people to know, and this is something I wanted to mention, but because I got insight from it, and sorry to take up everyone's time, but if you're applying to a role and it says requires a STEM discipline or quantitative discipline, they will contact you even if you're from economics. So that's one thing I wanted to say. It's just I've noticed from my past economics fit in that kind of quantitative STEM discipline to recruiters and to companies. So that's just kind of one thing I wanted to get the message across.
So you mean that students should not be discouraged? Sorry. So Sam, you mean students shouldn't be discouraged if there is this STEM?
If it's a STEM or if it says quantitative economics, they will contact you. Majority of the time, they will be happy with somebody who's done economics. And I think it only makes it easier, going to what Adam said, if you focus on more quantitative stuff in economics. But even then, I think don't be completely discouraged if it says you have to be if it says computer science is necessary, okay, maybe that's a push. But if it says STEM or quantitative background, what I've seen is that economics fits right in there for a lot of recruiters.
Yeah. Adam, sorry to interrupt you earlier. You want to say something?
Yeah. I was just going to say, jumping off the back of that as well, do not be discouraged by some of the requirements that employers will put up on job roles on LinkedIn, for example. A lot of the time, because it's such a competitive sector, so many people will be applying for particular jobs. And then so a lot of the time employers will kind of go, well, in that case, we're going to say you need another 2 years more experience or a master's degree, or you need to know like 10 different like softwares or whatever. And I think that really kind of that adds to the atmosphere that I think we were talking about earlier, where it seems like you have to learn all of these different things and cover every base. That's absolutely not the case. And again, as long as you show yourself to be an interesting person who's got a genuine love for like what you do and like a genuine interest in the things that you do. And I think, again, I know I've said it quite a few times, but I would hammer on personal project is a very good thing to get on board. If you kind of show that initiative, it really does not matter, like if you don't have the masters or you don't kind of have those. If it says you need to have 5 years of industry experience and you're coming in as a graduate, maybe not. But if it says that, we want a master's or we want like 5 different technologies and you maybe understand a couple of them, or things like that, apply anyway. A lot of the time, they're just kind of trying to make it seem like they're a lot more elitist than they actually are in senses. So,
But I would still say that whenever you apply for this type of job, still try to prepare a well-tailored application. Try to focus on the points that you think are the most important, and try to provide evidence that you are able to cover these points. Or even if you don't have the experience, you have the drive and the drive and sorry, I'm a bit stuck now. So you have this drive to learn
the dedication.
The dedication. Yeah, exactly.
Don't be lazy. Write specific cover letters and CVs for each job. It goes a lot further.
Yeah, I agree.
Great, guys. So thank you a lot so much for joining us today. So you shared a lot of great insights. I hope everybody who joined today found it useful, and a lot of people who will listen to this in the podcast. So great again for having you today. I hope I'll see you soon in person as well. And have a good day and all the best to you guys.
Thank you,
have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye.